A story telling a story. Origin and Death of the Self by Jeff Welch and my commentary. To begin with, this author, Jeff Welch, was introduced to me by Alok Mathur, presently the Director of Teacher Education at Rishi Valley School. In response to a rather broken assembly I had the occasion to present many years ago, he shared with me another article by him on football as an allegory for how we engage with others and about the virtues of passing. An aficionado such as myself did appreciate it. What I hope to be able to present via this article by him is a certain capacity of consideration to ourselves and others, which I think can very easily die out were we not to actively intervene and point out what it may yet reveal to us. To begin, all experience, especially that of an educational bent, whether remembered accurately or not, builds the story of a fictional me, such as the one writing these words right now. All the accrued stories of my life define who I think I am, even including the stories around so-called self-knowledge, which is actually a story telling a story. And here I'd like to point out that representing an experience, ours and that of others, is perhaps exemplary. When I tell you who I am, a presenter before a screen, an aspirant for a job, a son, a friend, an aspiring teacher, these are trajectories and relations in my life. They are as substantial as the knowledge that you have of a unicorn having one horn. You know this even if a unicorn does not exist. Yet I do exist, and in acknowledging these relations of mine, am I able to portray something decidedly more substantial? Yes, but inasmuch as I know about these relations, these trajectories, inasmuch as I can predicate what they are, amiable, angry, disheartening, these semblances form fictions, which is not to say that fictions, just like your knowledge, are not real. In returning to Welch's article, I'd like to unpack here all of our stories and to ask how have they helped us live in the world. As I see it, little can be done to help the world, or ourselves actually, or rescue us from the disconnecting, storied past, which is with its limited version. Let's take one of the origin stories or myths to try to understand more about this. The metaphorical, biblical Adam had no stories to tell until he partook of the apple of knowledge, after which he apparently became the first actor on the planet, setting him apart from the other animals. This attracted thoughts of dominion and delusions of separation, grandeur in psychological parlance, raising him up and above all of creation, in both his eyes and later in the colluding eyes of other sapiens. This sowed the seeds that would ensure his own destruction as he began to destroy himself by destroying the world. Oblivious to the connections and its obvious conclusion, Adam and Eve then used their newfound knowledge to pass on this dominant heritage for their children to act out as the first education system evolved. And as I recall, they begat and begat and begat. Soon after, humans pined for that which had been lost, a connection that was terribly missed. And so they invented ways to fill this void with the so called spiritual search, to find their place and meaning in the great scheme of things. And if not the spiritual search, then the material one, or myriad variations on the theme, all of which would come back to bite them in the backside, or the backsides of the next generations. And here we are today, folks. Each has scooped out a bucket of water from the stream of life, naming it the self, and tried to understand life's vast energy by exploring this tiny bucket. They thought that by modifying the water in the bucket through self-knowledge, they would somehow be able to affect the whole and fix any and all problems that would inevitably arise due to their myopia. They also looked for ways to escape from the inner sorrow and alienation arising from their sense of separation. They tried to escape the associated pain using drugs and diversions, hence the opioid and material addictions of today. Though I would say that in being able to share some of these stories, we are, in a measure, able to circumvent some of our separateness by passing the ball, so to speak. So this is our story, one of longing to get back to an imagined lost paradise, the very thing that thinks that it is above the animals and unconnected to the trees, wants to also partake in the beauty of their world, as long as it remains in control. There is the paradox that is not possible. We forget that before knowledge, there is no comparison, no higher, no lower, no right or wrong, no morality. Anger was anger, tears just tears, and joy, joy. And we had no reason to act, no need to impress. And here, I would interlude to point out that the pain which we can share, or rather the pain we cannot share at all, is true horror. For when we lose the ability to represent an experience, even to ourselves, it becomes forgotten. But the phenomena of the event leaves traces, even as forgetting, and trauma is a name which psychoanalysts have used to describe this. Our shared story can be followed in the analogy of one lifetime. From the embryo until the taking on of a separate self, a self-conscious entity, very early in childhood, after which time we have to act out a part, to strut and fret our hour upon the stage, always pining for that distant time when all was as it should be. And this capacity of ours to hope, which presents itself to us almost as a principle, is perhaps my nominee for the idea that makes us human. But mostly only when the chips are down and we wonder as to our purpose. Generally, we reinforce the mistaken belief that the earth was something created for man, who can use and abuse it at will. Now that we have finally discovered that there are probably billions of planets like ours, we are faced with the irrationality of that premise. As actors, then, we ask the question, now that we have taken over control, what is our responsibility? But this question, or rather this kind of question, is coming from an actor, from our script of who we think we are. How can we say or trust from where our lines are coming from. Now, I too have no way of knowing where these lines came from. It is it not the same dichotomy of the mind that created the problem is not the mind that can solve it? Is it not coming from the premise that knowledge can solve everything? This is often what is driving our school curricula and everything else in schools. Even this cannot, even this story cannot be fully understood, let alone expressed accurately in words, since it came, or rather, since it comes from the bucket we call ourselves. To understand it would be to pour the bucket back into the stream and to end the self. Not that that can be done, and who'd want to anyway. Perhaps we may help ourselves to a mug, if I were to take a mug. Without a story or agenda, when we walk through a meadow or other pathless region, we may wander, much like Mary Oliver reports doing in her poems, to a bystander steeped in the rains of time. It might seem purposeless, wasteful, or whatever. But in the relaxed state of wandering, what other senses may emerge? An instinctive sense might flow through, and we might or might not avoid treading on the flowers. However, it won't be because we should or should not. As we wander, we might or might not smell the flowers or the fresh bear poop, neither more important than the other, and both capable of giving instruction, even insight. As we ramble, completely connected to the world around us, our story quiet, our bodies relaxed, not contracted, we may become a channel for life to sense everything, so that we may see and do what it wants us to do. Will it direct our energies to change our schools? There is no answer from knowledge, but my guess is do what you may from that energy. You can do no harm. And now, bringing us to the present, here as I write, am I wandering or am I acting, and therefore contracting? I'm guessing it will be the latter because my story is probably playing out. And I'll want you to like what I write. I'll want to be safe, just as you, for your own sake. Might want me to be, and in so doing, I separate myself from you by wearing my mask, my story, so that we may be comfortable, avoiding those words too close to the bone. In our classrooms, we will play out these stories in order to feel safe. And I would say, would we trade the stories our masks have to get to know each other's ineffable selves? Indeed, I read theatre as prescribing this. It would also teach us a sensitivity to the sentiments of the other, for ultimately this is what is wound up beneath masks and their tails. So is there a happy ending to my story? Is there a way to connect? Is there something that I can do right now or in my classroom that will help repair the damage we see daily all around us, in which I am complicit and yet think I am separate from? We see modern day Adams and Eves in our classrooms, turning again to the new apple, the projected panacea of artificial intelligence, to solve ever more complex and sinister problems with the same mind that caused them in the first place, thereby reinforcing their illusions and separation. What will they do? Has each new apple of knowledge, the word, fire, wheel, printing press, television, nuclear power, or artificial intelligence, widened the separation while deepening the illusion of progress? Each of us will have our own answer to these questions, coming from our particular and surely different, yet similar, story. And therein lies both the rub and the possibility of much needed, amazing grace. There is no one answer, no path, except where we are now. And with that, I conclude my recital and unseemly interjections. This is a small essay which I wanted to read out and present to you. It's one that I appreciated very much.